worst toxicities that we could be exposed to would be the ones of things that we think are good for us, that we are purposely putting in. Get sicker. So what we're trying to do with these things that, well, the problem that people see, because people judge things on the short term and they don't understand detox. Humans often feel better when we suppress detox because the toxins are not coming out of storage. We are keeping them in storage. Okay, Ivermectin and its relative Ivermectin are sold as ant bait and roach to kill ants. Like it's an insecticide. And it has been in the research. If you take ivermectin and it's still in your system, which it does store in all of the tissues of your body, that's in the research too. And it does penetrate the blood-brain barrier. But if it's in your blood and you have fleas or mosquitoes feed on you, it will kill the fleas or mosquitoes that feed on you. So you become a walking insecticide. Now, if anybody thinks that's healthy, some people might be like, wow, that's great, I'm killing bugs. You're an insecticide now. That's not good for anybody. What does modern medicine want to do? They want to give you something to make your labs look better, even if it makes you die sooner. Okay, well, what are we doing here? We are trying to fix the root cause.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Health Alliance Australia's podcast. Health Alliance Australia is a leading health advocacy organisation. We are dedicated to honouring bodily autonomy and well-informed health choices. My name is Jeannie Rose Angewartha, and I will be your host today. Here at Health Alliance Australia, we do present revolutionary ideas on health, which may challenge preconceived beliefs. We have had Dr. Karen Johnson present his regenerative healing on the atomic level. Dr. Kevin McCann discussed biowarfare prions infecting humanity. Professor James Giardino discussed the promise and perils of brain technology. To Professor Francis Boyle, biowarfare experts warning to the world, Dr. Joe Lee's string theory, and Dr. Richard Fleming's unified theory of SARS-CoV-2 and other health practitioners and doctors. Today, we have Dr. Garrett Smith, board-certified naturopathic medical doctor in Arizona, founder of the Nutrition Detective, best known for his work on the toxic bile theory and vitamin A toxicity and detoxification. Welcome, Dr. Smith. Now, so I watched your podcast on the Ivermectin double cross, and I was quite impressed to see, I was quite surprised actually to see that Bill Gates had been heavily involved with its research and distribution for many years, and also the parasite research. I do recommend that people go check out the full 2-hour video on your YouTube channel, Nutrition Detective, with an open mind. So I've asked you here today to discuss the toxicity of pharmaceutical products such as antivirals, to methylene blue, supplements that have been heavily promoted in the freedom and truth movements, and to answer questions about the long-term effects of these products, if there are any benefits to taking them, the beneficial supplements you do recommend, nutrition, and the results you have witnessed from people who have remove toxins from their body. We know there's a lot of dollars behind the scenes that are promoting these products. I don't know if everybody knows that, but if you look at people's affiliate marketing, there is big money being promoted within the truth freedom movements. I thought we would begin with a short introduction about yourself, followed by what you believe is the foundation of good health, the root cause of disease.
Oh gosh, well that's a small bit right there. That's just, well, thank you for having me on first. Okay, well, I'm down here in Tucson, Arizona. I'm a licensed naturopathic physician, as you said. I've been in practice now, what is it, 18 years doing this. I was a personal trainer before I was a physician, so I was into exercise and figuring out all the things we were doing wrong with exercise too. But then I got into naturopathic medicine because I was interested in fitness and nutrition, and that led here. And then I have always been after the truth in everything, like truth over face. Like I don't care about, people worrying. I don't worry about my rep. I want the truth. So if I do something wrong, if I did something wrong in the past, I want to figure it out and I want to know, and I'm going to change. It's kind of like a lot of people today, they get money from something and then they absolutely have to defend it because it's their income stream. I don't ever want to be that way. Actually, we'll get to talk about this, but even back in 2013, was when I stopped recommending vitamin D supplements. I was so into vitamin D back then. I was testing people in my office, and then I figured out it was not good.
Yeah.
And then I quit, and I told everybody in my practice, I made a mistake. You need to get off of this supplement that I put you on. And I've had to do that with vitamin A as well. And then I actually did a mea culpa, a kind of flip on flush niacin. And now I use that, where I used to be very suspicious of niacin, but I didn't know the difference between the different types. And once I learned that, it all became very plainly obvious. And so it's just, I've always been trying to find what we're coming to with toxic bile theory. I always felt like there was something that was the common thread in all chronic disease. I didn't know what it was back then, but I always felt like it was there. So, you'll hear people, and every alternative doctor goes through their phases of like, oh, it's candida, oh, it's carbs, oh, it's toxic metals, oh, it's, chemtrails. And are all these things part of the possibilities of how disease can manifest in people? Sure, yeah. But there was something causing all these conditions that I felt was related to one principle, one concept. And so that's where toxic bile theory came from. And then we got into the various, figuring out various things that are toxic that are very highly recommended by both the alternative and conventional communities. And I guess I'm the person who was put here with enough gumption to call BS on any of it and all of it. So
I mean, you're
that's
basically
really what
threatening
we're doing.
a multi-billion dollar industry here. I mean, it
It's
is
probably trillions. It's the
trillions.
various things that we're going against is probably trillions, because even just alcohol is hundreds of billions of dollars. And then you get into vitamin A, which is probably hundreds of billions of dollars too, when you count all the different formats of it. So, we're talking pork even. I mean, how big a market is pork? And so
Yeah.
we're getting into like the, it's not exactly something for someone of the faint of heart to go into, because I am challenging the incomes of lots of industries. Absolutely.
And it's
Yeah.
all about people's health in the end, isn't it? And I think, what we've witnessed over these years is that, sickness is an industry, like, and we are essentially standing up and saying, okay, they're actually playing both sides.
Yeah.
Um, which is, and of course, people get very, very, there's a lot of psychology, if you actually do some research into this, attached to creating this divide and conquer scenario. So then what happens is, on people on, say, team anti-jab become very, very protective of their counter narrative um, here. And this is what I've witnessed, to the point where they will defend it and lose that open-mindedness. I mean, I too have gone down that road, because we can only be as good as the information that we have. And I think where you come in here is that you've actually seen patients recover long term. And this is what we used to have. We used to have GPs, or doctors, that would follow a patient, let's say, we might have to go back hundreds of years, but you would have a family history. You would understand something from a long-term perspective. And I think a lot of traditional diets have sort of evolved that way. They've seen what works and what doesn't work. Well, we have totally lost touch with that. And now it's just this whole book selling of, where you have vegan diets versus carnivore diets versus, all of these particular modalities, and everyone's just arguing with each other. But what you're presenting here is a framework for understanding, on a layman's term, how the liver, being very central to the body's detoxification system, is affected by toxins, and how we safely remove these things from the body.
Yeah. 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 I didn't head into that part, but yeah. So coming down to one of the things I try to do, or I'll tell people, when you're asking like, okay, why do I have this condition? Well, what we've narrowed it down to is toxicities of various sorts, which impair the body's ability to function and damage the body, and then deficiencies of various sorts, which there's not that many, and that we really actually have to concentrate on. So we work on these toxicities and deficiencies, And then that we'll get into it later, but the toxic bile theory, that gets into all of that. So the way I like to think of it is, if somebody were to ask, if somebody says, well, I have anemia, I say, ask a question like a 5-year-old child would say, why? And then if somebody says, well, it's because I don't have enough red blood cells. Okay, why? And then they keep giving reasons until finally they get down to, well, it might be an iron deficiency. Well, when we get down to, let's say, I don't think that's the cause that much, unless people are actually losing too much blood, whether it's donating too much blood, bleeding too much, or like menstruating way too much. Like, normally, I don't talk much about iron deficiency because we fix it all the time. But anyway, so if somebody gets down to a nutrient, like an essential mineral, we're down to a root cause, right? We're always looking for the root cause. And if it was a toxicity causing the anemia, because a lot of toxicities can cause anemias, then we're down to a root cause. We can change that and completely change every question above it, right? So when we think about toxicities and deficiencies, I mean, it's what is poisoning us, or it is what is building us. So if we're getting poisoned and we're not able to rebuild or fix, then of course you're going to get sick. Now, we know that modern medicine conventional medicine has no interest in fixing anybody. As I joke about, they can't even fix the common cold. Like, that's how bad they are. And then if we actually think about it, if you think about the state of the world today, they're actually getting worse at their jobs. Like, the problems are getting worse. If you believe in germ theory and that we're victims of viruses, which I don't, but conventional medicine, the problem is getting worse under their watch, right? And then we get into the alternative medicine, and where they're giving, I joke that, like, no one has an acupuncture needle deficiency. No one has an herb deficiency. No one has, like, lots of drugs are based on compounds found in herbs. Okay. So they just tweak herb compounds just a little bit to patent them. So how different are pharmaceuticals than these herb compounds? Are herbs just weak drugs? Are herbs giving drug-like effects? If you don't have a deficiency of the herb, is it a drug-like effect? Is that what it's doing? Is it making your body do something it didn't want to do, or is it making your body do something it couldn't do on its own? But is that fixing any root cause? No. So we get into, those toxicity deficiencies, that's the basis of it. Now, the worst toxicities that we could be exposed to would be the ones of things that we think are good for us, that we are purposely putting in. So, like, as I get into a lot, vitamin A toxicity. The people will say, but I read all this research, and I say, well, we have multiple people now. We have many, many people who are recovering their health on a daily basis. But we have people who now have gotten their serum retinol down to below lab detection limits. It means they basically have none floating around in their blood. And then when you pair that with other research that has said there are apparently healthy, they use these words, apparently healthy babies, newborn babies, who have 0 vitamin A in their liver. So we have adults with close to 0 vitamin A in their blood, and newborns with basically 0 vitamin A in their liver. And we go, is this an essential thing? Do we need this? It apparently not, because wouldn't all these people be dead? Like, isn't that what essential means? Like, if you don't have it, if the deficiency gets bad enough, you'll probably die. So, and we now have people who have, like, Grant Genereux, so it's GGENEREUX.blog. He was the guy who kind of introduced the modern world about 10 years ago to vitamin A toxicity in terms of chronic vitamin A toxicity affecting people. He's been doing a very low vitamin A diet for 10 years. He fixed he was at the start, when he was really sick, he had chronic kidney disease. They were about to put him on dialysis. He had terrible jaundice. Well, I mean, he had jaundice. He was yellow head to toe, and he had eczema. Like, that was the part that bothered him the most, because he had this weeping, burning, painful eczema. And he went home, and doing his own research, looking at it as an engineer from somebody outside of the medical field, he figured out that it might be vitamin A in the food, and he stopped eating it.
So, because
as much
I
as
mean,
he could.
modern medicine does acknowledge, like, that vitamin A at higher levels is toxic. So what you're
Yes.
actually essentially saying is, it's not that it's any different, it's that you're saying that there is no place really for it in the body at all. It's not necessary at all. Whereas like
Yes.
modern medicine will say, okay, you can take vitamin A supplements, but don't overdo it because otherwise you'll end up with X, Y, and Z. And it's the same thing with vitamin D. It's established in literature already that vitamin D at high levels can cause calcification. Um,
Yes.
and we're not talking about vitamin D coming from sunshine as opposed to vitamin D coming from supplements. So
Right.
what you're essentially saying is that there is no real need to have these things to firstly to supplement, but also we need to minimize those within that we get within the natural food that we're eating every day, because over time you're saying that it builds up. And then when it gets to a certain point, a toxic level, then it manifests as symptoms, which then we might go along and think, oh, we'll just add a few more vitamin A and vitamin D. And then we wonder what is the hell is going on, because we're doing all the right things, right?
Right. Right. Well, so with vitamin A, when we have things that are not essential, if something is toxic and it's not essential, it is probably in its very nature a toxin. I mean, if it's not essential and it's not, and we know it's toxic at high doses, so then we start to get into, is it really essential at all, or is it just a toxin? Toxins have effects. That's why people take drugs, right? They pharmaceuticals are toxic. People take them because they have effects. One of the things I say about pharmaceutical effects is that the main indication for a pharmaceutical is its most common side effect.
Yeah.
So if you take a statin and it lowers cholesterol, the most common side effect of a statin is to lower cholesterol. It makes sense
Yeah.
to me because nobody has a statin deficiency. So anyway, when we get into these things that are, well, we can, so vitamin A, yeah, if people want to learn more about vitamin A, just go on my Twitter and look on my profile. I mean, look on my pin thread of threads. That's where I go through a lot of that stuff, or go to my YouTube channel because I know we got a lot of topics to go through. So vitamin D, okay, I'll try to make this quick. We know, or we assume, I should say, that we need light, sunlight, or ultraviolet light to live well, to thrive, to survive. I don't know if we absolutely have to have it to live. I don't know that. I haven't looked into that. If they put somebody in the dark for how long, do they die from lack of sunlight? Maybe they do. However, we do know that for humans to be really healthy, we do want them to have light. We've been told that the thing that mediates our health from the sun is vitamin D. Well, vitamin D is simply an oxidized, a very specific form of cholesterol that is oxidized, and oxidation usually means breaking down or damaged. So it's a specific form of cholesterol that is oxidized in the skin, and then we reabsorb it, and then we say that this is an essential vitamin. Okay. Well, so what vitamin D might just be is a remnant of showing us how much we have been in the sun. It doesn't necessarily do the things itself. Now, when we look into the literature and we start, and what's for sale for us, we see that vitamin D is sold as mouse and rat poison, as a rodenticide. And it will send dogs and cats that eat these baits to the hospital. We've seen that vitamin D in excessive amounts in dairy fortification by accident has killed children. We see that there's a history of, in South Africa, they studied the use of vitamin D as a potential genocidal tool. So we are dealing here with something that is very, very toxic. It is an alcohol. Cholecalciferol, OL, is an alcohol. Calcitriol, OL, which is the active form of vitamin D, is an alcohol. These are fat soluble. Anything that is fat soluble, I like to use the term fat storable, is stored in your fat, now what are we having a big problem with these days? Fatty liver. Okay, well, where do we store fat soluble toxins in the body first? The liver. Weird that we have these overdoses. Well, it used to be, right? Remember, everybody would say, well, A, D, E, and K, those are the fat soluble vitamins. You don't want to take too much of them because you can accumulate them and they can cause problems. You remember that?
Yep.
It's like today, everybody's forgotten that, or there's actually like maybe propaganda campaigns by certain influencers to make people forget this. There was a big YouTube guy the other day who just started recommending ungodly doses of vitamin D.
Yeah.
It's really, really bad. I'm positive it's a fake study out there where they were trying to sell men on mega dose, like mega doses of vitamin D to make their genitals bigger. And I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. How else to get guys to poison themselves
Yeah.
other than that? Um, Especially, let's say, some of the more conservative people who didn't get the jab.
Mm,
How are they going? So if let's say the jab was making people infertile, and that was especially leftists and particularly lots of women, well, how are they going to make the right side infertile too? Because they want all of them infertile. Well, they could do things like ivermectin and vitamin D and vitamin A. Bill Gates' favorite vitamin is vitamin A. Absolutely. He gives it out in free multivitamins in Africa. He's making golden rice where there's vitamin A in it. He's making biofortified sweet potatoes, and like he's all for it, helping to pay for. They actually call them, the World Health Organization has a page called Vitamin A Immunizations,
wow.
and they are giving kids shots, like months worth of vitamin A in a shot at the same time they give them their jabs. Absolutely. They're just like, let's get one and done. How better to cause toxicity than to give a mega dose all at once,
And because
right?
it's called a vitamin, right? Everyone thinks it must be good. It's the whole relabeling of something. There was a certain sugar that got a bad name. Well, it wasn't a sugar, but it was a fake sugar, um, aspartame. And I think
Oh,
they've relabeled that and called it
yes.
something nicer and more acceptable.
What did they
And I think
call it?
this whole marketing of vitamins, we assume from the word vitamins that it is a good thing. It's the same thing as vaccines. For many, many years, people just, and most doctors just thought, oh, a vaccine is a good thing, right? Obviously,
Right.
those people who are in the know don't. And so as soon as they rolled out what they called a vaccine, everyone was like, okay, let's just roll up, the people who are sold on
Right.
vaccines, because we've taken vaccines for 100 years and we're still alive, right? So I think it's the same thing when it comes to vitamins, is that there's a term, a word that they've used. It's kind of a spell, on
Yes.
people. So for example, you word the word vitamin. So for example, and then they think automatically it must be good. Vitamin A must be even better because it's the start of the alphabet. It's the alpha, it's the important one. And here you're actually saying that vitamin A, even in the foods that we're eating, we need to lower that. Now, where I was given something was by a microbiologist, and he said, do you know that plants are also trying to live?
Yes.
Plants and animals, they're trying to live, and therefore they produce natural toxins to survive. So, and I really thought about, I thought, oh yeah, they don't really want to be eaten, do they?
No.
So, in a lot of our bodies, and one of the most amazing things about the human body is it's got an adaptive immune system, is detoxification. We're always taking in various poisons. Not everything that we eat is there solely made for us to consume. In the whole Garden of Eden
Mm-hmm.
narrative that we want to believe. And that's really where it comes down to. We do want to believe that anything that's plant-based or from nature, animals, vegetables,
Right.
is good for us. So we can eat as much as we like, as much raw kale as we like, and it will be fine, except when we end up with kidney, stones and other issues.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. The big thing. Yeah. Plants do chemical warfare. That's what they do. They make biological weapons to protect themselves. Like they're not plants were not put there just to be victims. Like they're just serving us. I love that idea. And then I go, well, once you find, people will say, well, everything out there is for us to use. And I go, well, so are there poisonous plants? And they go, yeah. And I go, okay, so just go eat them. They're for your use. Like just, why don't they fit the mold? And then so what we are trying to do with what we do is we are trying to find the animal-based foods that are the least toxic and have the most nutrition for what we
Yep.
want. But less toxic is always more important. Everybody nowadays. So when we were talking about the conventional medicine and all this stuff, like, right, conventional medicine likes for you to be sick and get sicker because then you get on more drugs and you add more things and you're doing more therapies and you're doing all these things to save your life and you spend tons of money. Well, the alternative world also loves for you to spend money. So do they sell you on less toxins generally, less toxins in? Or do they sell you on buy this vitamin, buy this supplement, do this therapy, like buy this product? They're still selling people on tons of stuff because they need to stay in, they want to stay in business. And so if they don't tell somebody about, because if you go and tell them vitamin A, don't eat it, well, what does that do to the supplement industry and the pharmaceutical industry? Well, there goes multivitamins, there goes cod liver oil, there goes vitamin A supplements, there goes carotenoid, beta carotene, and astaxanthin, and all these others, the self tanning pills, supplements. There goes retin A, there goes Accutane, there goes actually forms of chemo. They use vitamin A as retinoic acid, three different forms of it in chemo.
Wow.
And when we say birds of a feather flock together, what do they often combine retinoic acid as chemo with? Oh, they combine it with arsenic. That's a great combo. Like that's health right there. Just take retinoic acid, like some of the highest side effect meds out there, Accutane and retin A, and combine it with arsenic. Brilliant. That's going to make people healthier. So everybody's about selling stuff. I come out there and I tell people, we need to stop. If you want to get healthier, the very first thing you need to stop, you must stop or at least greatly reduce or minimize your intoxing. Why does this make sense? Well, the more toxins you take in, the more toxic you're becoming. And even if you're getting rid of it, it's still running through your system causing damage until it's gone. So we have the intox causing damage. And then the more toxins you have come in, the more it requires more nutrients.
Mm.
So then if we already have nutrient deficiencies, then taking in toxins is making the nutrient deficiencies worse. Whereas if you simply reduce the amount of toxins coming in drastically is what we're after, but we reduce those toxins coming in, all of a sudden your liver and your other detox organs like your kidneys and your skin are less loaded. They can catch up on their work, right? If you had too much work to do, the first thing you would love for your boss to do is to give you less work. Like, can I catch up here? I'd feel better if I could catch up. Okay. But then you have less toxins coming in. So of the nutrients that you are getting, you're not using as many of them to detox new stuff. So you can also, in theory, catch up more on your nutrition status by simply not putting the poisons in. So I've always said, and how did Grant get himself better? He did a super simple diet of basically beef or bison, black beans, and brown or white rice. He didn't do any supplements. He didn't do any other pills. He tried a couple things here and there. He did a lutein pill and messed up his eyes for a bit, but which lutein's a form of vitamin A, and it messed up his eyes. Boy, that's weird. That's not what they tell us about vitamin A. So anyway, we prioritize stopping the intoxing before you can start the detoxing. Because, and also if you want to get the old stored toxins out of you, you need to facilitate the removal of toxins.
Mm.
This is not done through herbs. Like herbs and other things do not, okay. Weekend cleanses, week-long detoxes, these don't detox you at all. They just have you eat a bit less and take a bunch of stuff that usually makes you have diarrhea. That's not a detox. That's just like forced starvation. Anyway, what we are trying to do is we are trying to create a lifestyle. Well, there's three pillars of what I do. Reduce the toxins coming in, facilitate the removal of stored toxins, and give the body the specific nutrients that it needs to restore
And then that
repleted
includes,
stats.
and it's sort of it's interesting, isn't it, that one of the most powerful things that flushes the body is water. And yet
Yes.
in the tap water, they're putting all these chemicals and fluoride. So people really need to be very aware to put good quality water in order to facilitate
Oh,
the removal of that. And also within the food, even in fresh food, you've got glyphosate, which,
mhm.
as you have stated before, that I've read, impairs detoxification pathways. Um, and what I found quite interesting was some of the supplements being recommended within the freedom movement, like Quercetin, and we'll
Oh,
go
you mean
into
quercetin?
Ivermectin, PGP inhibitors. Now, if you wanted to just have a little chat about PGP inhibitors and why they're
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the things in the being recommended in the freedom movement, what we have to understand first that the act of detox. So one of the sayings I have is it's a poison on the way in. So when it comes in, it causes damage, and then it can be stored. It's also a poison on the way out because once you free it up, I mean, one of the reasons the body puts toxins into the liver and the fat is because it can't get rid of them right away. It just doesn't have the capacity to do that. Kind of like if you had too many jobs coming to your desk and they're stacking up on your desk or in your inbox and you can't get to them, well, then they just wait. They don't go anywhere. They just wait for you to do them. And then they stack up and they make you more stressed. And with us, we'd get sicker. So what we're trying to do with these things the problem that people see because people judge things on the short term and they don't understand detox. Humans often feel better when we suppress detox because the
Ah,
toxins are not coming out of storage. We are keeping them in storage. So it's when the toxins come out and leak into your blood, which again gets into toxic bile theory, but when they leak into your blood from the bile that is made by the liver, then you are basically self-poisoning yourself. So if you could shut down the bile production or just keep the toxins stuck in your liver or in other places, you can feel better for a while.
okay.
But then just like building up behind a dam, at some point, the poisons are going to damage the very things that are holding them enough. I mean, I've got research showing that bile damages the very liver cells that make it. Like bile is the most toxic fluid in your entire body by definition. That's how your liver gets rid of toxins. It puts them in the bile. So the bile is full of your liver's toxins. Nobody in detox talks about the bile much. They
Yeah,
just,
and
well, or
that
they don't.
really that really explains things, for example, like the carnivore diet or people eating a lot of organ meats,
Yeah.
that even certain foods will shut down the detoxification pathways, and therefore fish, maybe certain supplements, even
Yes.
alcohol to some degree when you think, people are on a particular high. So what people are judging it by is they take these products, whether they're food products or supplements, they feel really great for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and it could even be, months. And then they hit a brick wall when the bile builds up to such a point that it can no longer be held within the liver. And then they get a whole manifestation of disease
Mm-hmm.
is the theory behind it. And of course, it's very difficult to put two and two together because, as humans, we like if we get food poisoning straight away, we know straight away that's food poisoning. But when you have a slow form of poisoning in the body, and supplements are a great form of slow poisoning, I must say, because we're firstly we're buying it, and then we're poisoning ourselves daily, and then at the end of it, you won't really even recognize the one from the two because you've taken it for so long. So I mean, you might have taken a certain product for months, and I've had, and we could probably go into ivermectin at this stage.
Yeah.
I've had people say, "Oh, I took ivermectin because I had COVID or I had something, and I felt really good." So in
Mm-hmm.
essence, this could be tied into what you're actually saying here. It shuts down the bile pathways.
Yes.
People feel good. It relieves the symptoms, but then they continue to take it, and some of them take it on a daily basis. And there was one. Apparently, I don't know which influencer it was. He was ivermectin for everything. Ivermectin for cancer, for heart disease. Literally ivermectin for everything. He had 40,000 or something like that in his Telegram channel. And guess what? One day he died,
Oh, yeah.
but it was Pharma that killed him. You
Yeah.
see, it was because he was speaking on ivermectin that killed him. Now, of course, people can have their various belief systems, but in the end, there was no autopsy done. But we would surmise that it was actually the ivermectin that had slowly poisoned him if he was taking it daily, because on the safety data sheet of ivermectin, it clearly states that it is a poison. I'm pretty sure it's not.
Yes.
That has no natural
No, it's
place in
sold
the
as
body.
it's an insecticide. It's sold as just, I don't want to interrupt, but okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Ivermectin and its relative avamectin are sold as ant bait and roach to kill ants. Like it's an insecticide. And it has been in the research. If you take ivermectin and it's still in your system, which it does store in all of the tissues of your body, that's in the research too. And it does penetrate the blood-brain barrier, but if it's in your blood and you have fleas or mosquitoes feed on you, it will kill the fleas or mosquitoes that feed on you. So you become a walking insecticide. Now, if anybody thinks that's healthy, some people might be like, wow, that's great. I'm killing bugs. You're an insecticide now. That's not good for anybody.
I know.
So yeah, it's pretty wild. Actually, while I'm on the ivermectin thing, so ivermectin in the research is a PGP inhibitor. Methylene blue, which we mentioned earlier, is a PGP inhibitor. I'm not sure, but I think quercetin is a PGP inhibitor, if I recall correctly. I've
Yeah.
looked up so many of these things, sometimes I forget. And then all three of them also inhibit what I consider the most important detox enzyme in the body, which is aldehyde dehydrogenase. This helps break down aldehydes into acids. It's a super important enzyme, and it gets bottlenecked a lot. Like it lots of things, deficiencies and toxicities affect it. They slow it down. Like as an example, there was a study done on mice, and they gave the young mice alcohol, and then they gave old mice alcohol, and they saw that in the young mice, ALDH sped up from the alcohol, and in the old mice, the ALDH slowed down from the alcohol. But when we think of aldehydes are what makes you get hungover. Well, young people don't get hungover as much because
Mm.
they're young and they're not as toxic. So then their ALDH was able to compensate, speed up. They didn't get hungover as much as the old mice did because they took more poison in. They're older, they're more toxic, and so their ALDH couldn't compensate and it actually slowed down. So this is what a lot of these, I could run through the drugs of a lot of these freedom movement things, the drugs and the supplements, and almost to a T, nearly every one of them is an ALDH inhibitor, if not also a PGP inhibitor. ALDH detoxes aldehydes. PGP, P-glycoprotein, is the basic detox mechanism for your cells. P-glycoprotein is in your cells and it takes toxins out. That's the simplest way to explain it. So you're actually inhibiting cellular detox when you take these things. So you just kind of slow down the whole detox. And then funny thing, people go, I feel amazing. And you go, you took a pharmaceutical or a bioflavonoid. None of these things are necessary. I mean, bioflavonoids also have like things that are bioflavonoids. Phytoestrogens are bioflavonoids, like the soy phytoestrogens,
Yep.
and tannins are tannins are also, they're all polyphenols. Sorry, I mean they're all polyphenols, and you got bioflavonoids in there. And you've got other things in there. They all slow ALDH. Like even people think that these brightly colored fruits and vegetables, like berries and other things, are great for them. The bright color in them comes from polyphenols.
So this also ties in to the brain.
Yes.
And because as you said, that opens the blood-brain barrier. But I found it interesting that all of these things also lower testosterone, but also causes infertility. Now, if we're looking at the big picture of what exactly is the agenda at
Yeah.
hand, which is depopulation and infertility,
Yes.
you know, so it all, and also I would also say making people more docile. Now, it's quite well known, well, within certain circles, that fluoride makes people more docile. And that was the real purpose behind putting it into the water supply. You'd have this docile population. So I was thinking here with a lot of these drugs that are being promoted within the freedom movement, it has actually made people more docile, less likely to fight back, and more open to manipulation, to take more of these particular things. And it kind of, and also long-term wise, we are looking at people who were, say, thought they escaped the agenda, poisoning themselves and potentially not being able to have children, yeah, or to have
Yeah.
children that have various health issues because they have now passed on this, and then they go along and they might even tell their children to take, ivermectin in order to avoid the spike protein, right? And these people are taking it because of a fear that they're going to end up with issues of shedding, that's poisoning their blood. And I'm looking at it thinking, well, how do you know, is it shedding from some biological agent that because you've been exposed to, or are you actually, because you're doing all of these things, are you actually poisoning yourself? And
Yeah.
you're looking in your blood and you're saying, okay, it's shedding. So therefore I need to take more of these PGP inhibitors and various things in order to protect myself. But oh no, it's not going away. So therefore, um, you know, I'm going to live inside some sort of bubble and it must be chemtrails. And of course, anything
Right.
I would think at this point, I think, because I've on my own health journey myself, as I mentioned to you earlier, is that the body is incredibly resilient to detoxification when it's given the right ingredients and to
Mhm.
health. And what I love about you too is that you're also advocating things like exercise. You look healthy, you know, like you know, it's not that you're just advocating supplements and diet, which is often where people are just stuck. That there's a whole holistic lifestyle change about it that people don't want to make the change with. Um, so yes, if we could talk about that aspect, the fact that it can affect the brain, and where we could even think, I think you said something about ivermectin potentially causing um, the symptoms of what we call prion disease of neurodegeneration.
Yeah, yeah, there's other people out there who have gone much more into this than I have, but one of the patterns that people noticed back when Mad Cow was going around, the CSE, the Creutzfeldt Jacob, and I don't want to say the last word wrong, but it's one of those encephalomyelo something, where it's a big long one, CSE. In They were pouring ivermectin. You can look up ivermectin cattle pour on, POURON, pour on. They were pouring ivermectin on the spines of cattle to keep the mosquitoes off of them.
Mm,
And next thing they know, they're developing these strange proteins in them. And we wouldn't want to blame the ivermectin, because if you don't know already, ivermectin is everywhere in the food supply already.
mm,
So for anybody who thinks that ivermectin is saving the world, we're already all eating ivermectin in the tissues of all the muscle meat that's out there. It's everywhere. Nobody's really escaping it completely. So if it was fixing everything and everybody, it would have already done it.
yeah, we'd all be cured of cancer by now, right?
Right. Yeah, and then imagine this. Let's just use our brains for a second, right? So let's say ivermectin is a generic, and then this new fenbendazole is a generic. So people will claim, oh, ivermectin's good because nobody's making any money on it. Well, first of all, would the pharma cartel make anything that they didn't make any money on? Are they doing us favors? Like, are they losing money to save humanity? No, they never were. That's the biggest joke of a thing. And then they'll say, oh, ivermectin, won a Nobel Prize.
Mm,
Who gives the Nobel Prizes? I'm pretty sure the word for those people would be the elite. And are they really after us living long, healthy lives? And maybe they think, oh, they made a mistake and they gave ivermectin a Nobel Prize, but they didn't mean to. Oh, give me a break. So then we get into, the ant bait and all that stuff. And then we get into, if two generic drugs that can be bought very, very cheaply were all of a sudden the cure for cancer, and the oncology business and all of these doctors and all of these medical supply companies and all of these pharmaceutical companies were standing to lose, probably up at least in the very high hundreds of billions of dollars, even into the trillions maybe. If they were going to lose all that money, do you think the whole pharma cartel would allow them to keep making and selling generic drugs that cured cancer for almost no cost, that they were losing money on? Sometimes people are really so deep in their own BS in their minds that they can't see this.
mm.
They're not our friends. They're not trying to save humanity. Come on. They're giving
Yeah,
you an
and I think, you know,
insecticide.
like you said, what put me off, I'd say in 2021 when it was all going down and everyone
Mm-hmm.
was getting their ivermectin from India and importing it, thinking they were very special with this special information that they had. What put me
Like they
off
wouldn't shut that down,
ivermectin
right?
was if the only pharmaceutical grade ivermectin you can actually get from a doctor if you had a doctor that would prescribe it off label for you, was made by Merck, which I think you've also said methylene blue is
Mm-hmm.
the major supplier of it. Now, where that rang sort of alarm bells for me was Brandy Vaughan worked, the whistleblower, anti-vax whistleblower that started and founded learntherisk.org, was worked for Merck, and she mysteriously died in 2019. I think she's 2019, 2020, one of those years.
Okay.
And she would have been a huge problem, during the pandemic for them. And I look at it and I think, well, how can, on the same side of things, this company that is selling something that's trying to save us, is at the same time this whistleblower that comes from them, who's talked about fraud and all sorts of things, is mysterious. And she actually predicted her death,
Mm.
right? For many, many years, she felt she was in grave danger for blowing the whistle on fraud within Merck. And she suddenly, and she did the whole learn the risk, the dangers of vaccines. She predicted even that there would be mandatory adult vaccines. And I've seen a lecture of her giving to the public, and this was years and years ahead of her time. And everyone in that station, and this is probably about 2017, 2016 maybe, before any of the mandates ever came out. So she was right on the money, right? And she worked
Right.
for Merck. And here now we have a situation where one of the biggest suppliers of this is of these alternatives that are being promoted within the alternative market is a pharmaceutical company. That with it, and not just any pharmaceutical company, a pharmaceutical company with a very dodgy history, that you would say, it's all circumstantial. We all know, like we could connect the dots, and anyone could, we'll just say that. But I think what's very interesting, that I was looking at your podcast about methylene blue, was that, and I had a friend say that he had 2 jabs, and that he's taken methylene blue, and it has cleared up his thinking. So again, we're looking at a case where it's slowing down the detoxification,
Mm-hmm.
and that you were saying in order to detoxify now from the methylene blue, which is actually even going into the brain,
Yeah.
where it's turning your brain blue, right? So if someone's
Once
had
it's exposed
methylene
to
blue
oxygen, yes, it turns blue. Yeah.
and they die, that if they cut their brain open, it's blue, right? This is
Well, it's with those were with IVs. Those were very high doses, but so the blue actually comes about when they expose it to like the outside air. So it does it normally. This is why people are taking methylene blue and they're not turning blue, because it actually stays. I forget the name of it. The other form of the methylene blue, leuco something blue, but it basically means it's clear.
yeah.
So when it's in your system, it's clear.
Oh,
But
okay.
once the oxygen stops going to it, then it turns blue. So, or when you stop I forget if it's oxidizing or antioxidizing it. I forget that. Kelsey Kenny is much better on that,
So
the
how do you
chemistry of
slow
all that.
down? How do you slow down the process once someone's taken all these poisons, and
Yeah.
then they start to try and detoxify?
Oh
Is
man.
it a case of you have to slow down the process of detoxification, or else they're going to get massive symptoms and Herx reactions?
Well, let me add one thing to what you were saying about Merck before. Merck was the only major pharma company that didn't come out with a jab. But all of a sudden they're doing the ivermectin and the methylene blue and all these things afterwards. So I think it was kind of a case of they made arrangements of like, we make the jabs, you make the ivermectin, we'll trade, like I get this part, I get this piece of the pie, you get this piece of the pie.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very interesting. So then we get into methylene blue. Like in the methylene blue show, in the parts I did, I went over how methylene blue slows down detox. I have never come across another compound that slows detox as many detox pathways as methylene blue does. Methylene blue, when it's in the water, when it leaks into the water, it is considered a pollutant and very dangerous to consume, but yet people are taking it in water daily. They're taking like 30 cents worth of methylene blue in a bottle that's being sold to them for like $55 or something.
Wow.
It's I mean, think about it. If there was like evil forces in the world, wouldn't they love to poison you and have you pay them money to do it? Like that would be the greatest evil accomplishment they could do.
Yeah.
So we get into these things where they shut down detox. So how is this bile, toxic bile affecting the brain? Well, I'll give you a quick overview of toxic bile theory so we can understand how shutting down bile production and detox can help the brain and anything else for a short bit, because bile is related to cancer and other things like this. So you can
Okay.
shut down bile production and see cancer start to resolve. And then when you stop shutting down the bile, chemo does this, it comes back worse.
Ah.
So toxic bile theory. Okay. Try to make it quick. Bile made by your liver is how your liver gets rid of toxins. So when people talk about detox, the very first thing we must realize is that nothing is truly detoxed until it has left your body. If it is still in your body, you haven't detoxed it. Like just we'll make that the standard. Like detoxification means it's gone. Because when you understand the recycling of toxins and bile, then it starts to make more sense. So your liver makes bile. You want the bile to go down your bile ducts and not go anywhere else and go into your intestine. And then in terms of detox, the best thing you could do with it would be to poop it out. So think of it as the bile is the liver's poop, and then it mixes with your food, and then eventually that becomes your poop. That's what we want. Now, along the way, this is the thing people have to understand about your skin and about your intestines, is they aren't picky. It will absorb practically anything that touches it. So if you put things on your skin that you wouldn't eat, you are basically ingesting them into your blood through your skin.
Yeah.
That's a rule on cosmetics, right? If you wouldn't eat it, don't put it on your skin. Okay. But so anything you put into your intestines is being reabsorbed. So when your liver dumps bile, it's actually been, shown in a normal diet, like the standard American diet or whatever, you are reabsorbing 95% of that bile back into a very specific, the portal vein circulation that absorbs stuff from your gut. And then that sends it to the liver to be sorted through. Okay, so you have this like loop of bile and you're pooping out 5% of it a day, only 5% on a normal diet. So then this bile, when you think of bile, you have to think of all the toxins your liver is coming across. So it's not just bile, it's vitamin A, it's copper, it's forever chemicals, it's DDT, it's anything you've ever heard of that's bad that can be stored in the liver or that the liver detoxes could potentially be in your bile. Copper, iron, lead, cadmium, mercury in your bile. The most toxic soup in your body. So this can dissolve holes through things. Remember, we talked about vitamin A. It turns into retinoic acid. Retinoic acid is used as a chemical peel on people's skin to dissolve your skin, to dissolve the layers of cells. And then you get new cells to come up underneath it. So you get the little chemical peel, baby face for a while by destroying upper layers of skin.
Yep.
So imagine what retinoic acid, which is in the bile, is doing to your liver cells, to the bile ducts, to your gut lining. Leaky gut. People talk about leaky gut and they're just like, these things cause leaky gut. And I'm like looking at them and I'm like, how does gluten eat holes through your gut? How does it do that? Like it's just a little wheat protein. It doesn't eat holes through anything. You know what's been found in celiacs though? Celiacs trigger more bile dumping when they eat gluten. Okay, so they trigger more bile dumping. Well, in a cell model of celiac disease, the researchers could not create the inflammation of celiac disease until they added retinoic acid to the cells. They had to add this retinoic acid vitamin A to the cells to get the inflammation or the dissolving of the cells that they needed. So then we start to think, okay, and then people talk about celiac and leaky gut and gluten and all this stuff. What if it's the toxic bile in the gut with all that toxicity plus the retinoic acid, which is known to eat away cells, that is then eating away their gut lining?
Yep.
And retinoic acid is a much more likely cause of leaky gut. And this is even in the research. They've said like vitamin A may be the cause of leaky gut. And then they also say bile modulates basically your tight junctions in your gut. So we've combined vitamin A and bile right there.
So we're looking at the wrong things. So people minimizing their their gluten may have a sort of a temporary effect because it stops them from dumping the bile into,
Well,
but essentially where they could find healing is by reducing their vitamin A down to zero.
or close to it. You cannot have a zero
And
vitamin A diet
obviously
unless
you
you're
prefer to zero.
eating super processed foods, and that would probably cause you more problems. It's yeah, that's but so what we want to do with the toxic bile. So when we understand this, then what do we start doing for the bile? We start making it less toxic
Mm,
by putting less toxins in, because you're gonna be getting rid of it. So we start putting less toxins in. Then we facilitate the removal of old toxins, which is basically the bile, right? It's the recirculating bile and the stuff that's getting stored. How do we do this? Charcoal, um, soluble fibers. Soluble
yeah,
fibers soak up stuff. We may be getting into some other binders here soon, when I can find a good enough source, because not all binders are clean. Like clays often are full of lead,
yeah.
and you take them orally, and then your stomach acid dissolves them, and now you just freed up lead in your system. And there are cases of lead toxicity from healthy clays that people are taking. I won't take that risk. I will not risk making somebody more toxic as I'm trying to detox them. That's just something I won't do.
Mm,
So, with toxic bile theory, so you have this toxic bile going in the digestive system. Well, that's where you want it. But if it eats holes in the liver cells and in the tiny bile ducts of the liver, it leaks into the bloodstream directly from there. They call that intrahepatic cholestasis. Inside the liver, toxic leaky bile into the blood. That's really what that means. Okay. Then it can go into the big bile ducts and into the intestines, or it can back up into your stomach, and that's GERD or
yep.
ulcers. And it can even go back up into your pancreas, cause acute pancreatitis, or I believe over time, it causes diabetes by eating away at your
Mm,
pancreas. So then it could leak into your blood. So it could go and in the bile ducts and the big bile ducts or the leak or the gut, it eats holes in that. And then that leaks into the blood from there. So you have all these ways. It's actually I forgot, in the stomach, if you get bile up into your stomach, and if you have GERD, you have bile in your stomach. I
yep.
had a whole live stream on GERD. So if it goes up into your stomach, I've actually shown research that you can absorb the bile directly into your bloodstream from the stomach itself. So you don't have to have holes. But then
Yeah.
imagine if you have ulcers, then you have bile just leaking into your bloodstream from your ulcers. And the cause of ulcers is the same cause as leaky gut, which is bile eating
Yeah, and I
holes.
think everyone's quite familiar, aren't they, with the whole idea of gut health, right? But
Oh,
we just are focusing on things like probiotics, um, and yeah, and minimizing gluten.
yeah.
Obviously, I think a lot of people minimize dairy in order to heal their gut. And I think one of the big things too that people are doing is this, what is it? Where they boil bones for a long time. Bone
Oh, the
broth,
bone
right?
broth. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
which is high in histamines, and as you have stated, will also be probably high in toxins, I imagine, that
Yeah,
that
we get into so with bone broth, I mean bones tend to absorb lead if there's around. They will put lead in the place of calcium. This is one of the problems, one of the things that the body does is if minerals come in that are similar enough in various ways, they will replace each other. Zinc and
right.
copper do this. Calcium and lead do this in the bone. So if you're making bone broth, why are they trying to make bone broth? Well, I mean, the problem is that there could be lead in the bones. And if they don't test the bones, they don't know. Just because the farmer says, oh, we feed our cow real clean, you don't know what's in that well water. You don't know what's in the rain. You don't know what's in any of it unless you test it. So then there's a lot of glycine um, in bone broth or collagen or gelatin. There is a lot of glycine. Glycine is one of the things the body, the liver, will bind to bile in a process called conjugating. And the weird thing with that is glycine could make one type of, there's, I think at last count, there was at least 56 different bile acids that might be in somebody's blood that the liver might make. That's the last count I've seen. Okay. Some of those bile acids, you bind glycine to it, it becomes less of a problem. Some of them you bind glycine to it, it becomes more of a problem. Same thing for taurine, same thing for sulfates. So you can change the recipe of the bile and that changes the disease presentation. So
Mm,
that's why some people might feel amazing on glycine and other people feel worse. Some people feel amazing on taurine and some people feel worse. They don't understand the bile recipe. You mentioned the histamine problem. Do you know how we detox histamine?
By reducing vitamin A?
No. I mean, do you know how well, that helps. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because histamine goes through ALDH.
Okay.
So does dopamine. So does adrenaline. Like all the neurotransmitters, a lot of them turn into aldehydes. And they have to go through your detox system, which
Mm.
is the ALDH. So we have ALDH, histamine breaks down into an aldehyde. It has to go through ALDH. You can't clear those, then you're getting like a breakdown product of histamine floating around when it doesn't need to be, if you
Yeah.
could have cleared it.
And creating
So
an inflammatory state within the body that's
yes,
causing disease and all.
yeah, aldehydes are all inflammatory. Vitamin A has a form called retinaldehyde. B6, what we call vitamin B6, pyridoxine is an alcohol, just like retinol, vitamin A, and cholecalciferol and calcitriol, vitamin D. So pyridoxine is an alcohol, and pyridoxal 5-phosphate, the one that all the alternative people recommend, the active form of B6, pyridoxal means pyridoxaldehyde. So it's an aldehyde, and it can accumulate in your nerve endings and cause peripheral neuropathy if you get B6 toxicity. So we've been fed these lies that B vitamins are not stored. Oh yeah, you can store B6 in your nerve endings and get peripheral neuropathy. Um, so we had that, and then there was another part I wanted to go over about the probiotics that you mentioned. So here's a funny coincidence, right? Maybe you've done this. I'll know a lot of people who will listen to this have probably done this. They go on Amazon or they go on some, supplement website and they read about a probiotic. And you start reading the reviews. And there's people who say this probiotic is amazing. It changed my symptoms overnight and I feel so amazing and I'll never stop taking it. And then you hear other people, you go and you look at the bad reviews and people will be like, this is the worst thing I've ever taken.
Mm.
This gave me IBS. Like you can go and find this on almost every probiotic. How can one probiotic do these two things? Well, here's the coolest thing. I mean, it's cool, but when you understand it, the impact of it is huge. Probiotics can make your bile more or less toxic.
Oh.
So this is the connection between the liver and your gut biome. Everybody's like, oh, fix your gut biome. That's how you fix your health. Well, what is the environment that creates your gut biome? What is constantly being dumped into your intestines all day that coats your biome and either encourages good stuff to happen or encourages bad stuff to happen? Well, that's the bile.
Yep.
So the bile is creating the gut biome. Okay. That's like, it's like feeding it, like feeding a garden. Okay. So we have that going. But then if your gut biome gets bad over time, that gut biome actually takes the bile, and what are called primary bile acids are made by the liver. And then it goes into your gut biome. And if you have a gut biome issue or a dysbiosis, your gut biome turns the primary bile acids into secondary bile acids, which are extremely accepted as being the most toxic bile acids.
Yep.
And then you reabsorb those, a lot of them. Remember, we talked about 95%. They go right back to the liver. So now you've just sent more toxic bile, damaging bile, back up to the liver that then damages the liver. The liver then has to process them out again, push them back out, and hope that you poop out some of them. If you don't poop them out or they leak into your bloodstream, I mean, what I mean here is if they leak into your bloodstream, the next place they're going to hit is the kidneys, damaging the kidneys. If they get to if the kidneys and the liver can't handle the problem, then it starts coming out the skin. Toxic bile and chemical peels coming out of the skin is what causes your skin problems. It's the damage on the way out.
Oh, okay.
Like think if you could see leaky gut, it would look like torn up skin, right?
Yeah.
Well, what happened? That's from bile. So what happens when the bile comes out of your skin? It damages everything it touches. And then if it's just sitting in or on your skin, it's just going to keep irritating it and keep the same problem there all the time. This is why when there's things like minor acne and it's bile coming out of the skin, if people wash their face enough, they can keep the problem down because they're washing off the toxicity that's coming out of them.
But
So
if they really want to heal, they have to heal the the bile, you know, they have to clean up their body on the inside.
Yeah.
So I
I mean,
thought this would be
there's
a
a,
good place to actually
okay.
talk about where you changed your mind about nicotinic acid, which is a full flush niacin, and how that restores the balance in the body.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So nicotinic acid, also known as flush niacin. So I was kind of, I do believe there is kind of a, a disinformation program around nicotinic acid because for an example, like there was a study done where they gave some guys flush niacin, high dose, like 1,500 milligrams a day. It was the pharmaceutical stuff, so it's in a sustained release, which we don't like. Don't ever
Yep.
do sustained release flush niacin. But anyway, so they gave them this for 6 years. They had controls, and then they had the guys they gave niacin for 6 years. 9 years later, they looked at these guys' risk of stroke, and it was 15% less in the guys who took niacin 9 years ago. So it did some sort of detox back then that still resonated or residual effects 9 years later. Okay. So I was going through, a lot of people get confused on the research because they don't know about the types of niacin that are out there. They don't know about the metabolism of niacin. I didn't have the time to look into it, and it didn't interest me to, it was something that I knew was like going to be very difficult to unravel. And so I hadn't gotten to it yet. Um, and I tried, I'll be honest, I tried the flush before. I tried it in college and I didn't have it explained to me well enough. And it didn't have any like major impacts on my health right away in a good way. So I was just like, I don't like this. I'm not going to do it. And I thought, which is a good assumption to make, is if something made you feel like that, like the normal thing I would tell people is that's probably not good for you. Okay. But what we're understanding now more about detox is that that's an aldehyde. You're actually detoxing things out of your skin, and that's what causes that flush reaction, right? You could be, there's the Asian flush where Asian people, 50% of the Asian population is slow ALDH. So those are the folks when you hear about the Asian glow or the Asian flush and they drink alcohol and they have like one drink, maybe two, and they turn beet red and they're giddy and they're giggly and all this stuff, and they're very intoxicated. That's because they're not clearing the acetaldehyde from their system. So they're building up an aldehyde and they're turning bright red. Well, what niacin is doing is niacin is breaking up the flush in the skin, is it's breaking up the alcohols that are bound to fatty acids. So it's breaking them apart. It's putting the alcohol through alcohol dehydrogenase to break that down into an aldehyde. You have the aldehyde show up. That's the flush.
Yep.
But then the niacin runs the aldehydes through aldehyde dehydrogenase because niacin is the gasoline for the aldehyde dehydrogenase. You break those down quick, and then within an hour, the flush is gone. Like the flush came, it went, it's gone. Things usually start getting better day by day as you do that. So Kelsey Kenny joined. She's my niacin expert. She joined the Love Your Liver program, I think maybe several years ago. And she was, she had me on a podcast with her and some of her friends. And I saw on the podcast, I just could tell that she was very, very, very intelligent. And I could tell there was something more I had to know. And then we just started chatting, about science and about nutrition and stuff like that. And I kind of kept an open mind about niacin. I knew she was really into it. And she started presenting the data to me. And I started putting it together in my head the way I do with things. And kind of like vitamin A, where I was way back in the day when I was using it on people, and long term, I started to notice there were kind of small problems arising over time. Well, I started to put together the niacin and what it did in detox, and I was able to connect it to like the vitamin A detox process and the Asian flush thing, and it all started to make sense. And so now, and then I realized like you can hardly the plan, right? It's flush niacin is very hard. It's not very hard to get, but it's quite hard to get.
Yes. Yes.
Like if I go to my natural grocery store down the road, they have one brand, one type of flush niacin. That's it, 50 milligrams.
Yep.
That's the highest you
As
can
a
get
small
at the
dose.
store.
Yep.
So now I'm taking enough of it. I take a powder because I'm taking like 2,500 milligrams a day. I'm not suggesting everybody go out and do that because the more toxic you are, the less you're going to tolerate niacin because it's
Mm,
running through your toxicities and it can be too much. Like you can take too much and not feel good. I used to flush at 50 milligrams. I used to flush pretty hard at 50 milligrams. And over time, as I've been doing this detox now for going on 6 years, I can push detox harder now. It's just like the longer you've been running, the harder and faster you
mm.
can run.
And some people
So
enhance that detoxification by what they do is they take the niacin, they
mhm.
exercise,
Oh,
and then they
yes.
go into a sauna and they, you know, accelerate that. Of course, this sort of brings us into the topic of the actual, because they're detoxificating so fast, they need to restore all the nutrients. Otherwise, they end up with a sort of imbalance there. And I think you've got a few nutrients that, or nutrient vitamins that you say are essential: magnesium, potassium, sodium, zinc, selenium, and this other one, which you can pronounce, molybdenum.
Molybdenum.
Um,
It's okay. Here's what I tell people. So it's molybdenum, molybdenum. I tell people you can call it Molly or Molly B. If you can't say the word, just Molly or Molly B. I'll know exactly what you're talking about.
okay, yeah, Molly B. Actually, I've never heard of that particular
Oh man,
uh
that's very normal.
yeah,
Absolutely
I mean,
very
I've heard,
typical.
and also it's sort of interesting because some of these things, sodium, we've all been told to go on low sodium diets. Zinc, we've been told don't take too much of it. Obviously,
Right.
potassium is one of those things you don't want to overdose. You can get hot,
Yes.
too much potassium, which is obviously more just an imbalance than anything else. Magnesium, I think everyone has really quite heard
Yeah.
of, but I think you recommend it taken on your skin as opposed to the digestive system because
Yeah.
it can cause diarrhea as well. I'm not sure what your thoughts are. We'll just before we go that, I'm not sure. I thought I'd ask you about milk thistle. What your thoughts were on that, because often people will talk about that as something to help support a liver cleanse, and a lot of on the alternative side, there's a lot of things about various liver flushes, and
Yes.
recipes out there.
Well, so I can run through those real quick. Milk thistle is a member of the ragweed family. And what people will do is they'll look at short-term studies on milk thistle and they seem to look good for the liver. However, if you start looking at long-term chronic users of milk thistle, nobody had a milk thistle deficiency. So the
Mm,
milk thistle was forcing the liver to do something it either couldn't do or it didn't want to do. And what that tends to end up in the long term is it'd be just like it's like running a car too hard all the time. It's going to burn out
yeah.
sooner. And then you see the liver burning out sooner. There is nothing herbal that you're going to take that is going to, you may see short-term benefits in your liver. And yes, you might see your liver enzymes go down short term,
Mm,
but it's not fixing any problem. So let me just, before we get into the next part, let me get into, I now have a client who she came to me with primary biliary cirrhosis, which is, liver cirrhosis. Her doctor basically said, you're gonna slowly die. Because she was like, can I fix this? She said, no, you're just basically gonna slowly die. That's your liver doctor. That's your positive guy. Um, they usually just tell people like don't drink. It's got to be the lamest job like ever. The most depressing thing because you're just like, yeah, you're cooked.
mm,
So she did the Love Your Liver program. She ate a lot of for a good long period of time. She was eating beef and beans. Now, in the beginning, she was on TUDCA, which is a secondary bile acid, some of the more toxic bile acids that people say helps your liver and fixes your liver. A secondary bile acid is not ever going to fix any bile problem. But anyway, she was taking that. I'm sorry, she was taking UDCA, which is the pharmaceutical version of a bile acid, of a
mm,
secondary bile acid. TUDCA is just UDCA with a taurine attached, like I said earlier. So she was taking that and she said, every time I come off of this, my liver enzymes go way up. And my
yeah.
doctor freaks out and he puts me back on it. And then they come down and then I'm back to it. And I said, well, like this is the way we do things. And this is why obsessing on labs without knowing what you're doing can make people abandon good processes. What does modern medicine want to do? They want to give you something to make your labs look better, even if it
Mm.
makes you die sooner. Okay, well, what are we doing here? We are trying to fix the root cause. So we took her off the UDCA. She took herself off the UDCA, I should say.
Yeah.
And I said, your liver enzymes are going to go up. They're going to go up. You have to trust me. If you want to do this, you're going to have to trust me that if you're feeling better and your liver enzymes are going up, you are doing the right thing and you are getting better. If your
Yeah.
symptoms are getting better, I don't care what the labs say. I don't care what your doctor says. And you're just going to have to go along with it and trust me. And if we're right, she was my first cirrhosis case. If we're right, it's going to, the enzymes are going to start coming down. You're going to keep feeling better. Well, what happened? She listened to me. She kept doing it. She now has no cirrhosis.
Okay.
Her hepatologist has never seen anything like this before. I should tell you that Grant Generou's nephrologists, his kidney doctors, had never seen anybody recover from chronic kidney disease before either. So now we have a full liver recovery that they hadn't seen before, and we have a full chronic kidney disease recovery that they had never seen before. So we are helping people to fix things that they don't even know what's happening. Like, so what we're okay with, if we're doing the right things, I tell people, if we're doing the right things and you're feeling good about it, you're mentally good about it, the labs are absolutely secondary. Because if your feedback in your system is good, we're okay with the labs looking a little worse at the start, because we know long term the labs will get better and you get better. What is modern medicine and a lot of alternative functional medicine practitioners want to do? They just want to treat the labs. They want the labs to look better.
Yeah.
And then they have people come back in, because I did functional medicine for a while, and people would come back in and I'm like, you put them on $300 or $500 of supplements a month, and they come back and they're like, I'm like, your labs look great. How do you feel? And they're like, I don't feel any different. Like, what? $500 to pay more money to have labs that suck. Like,
Yeah.
that look better. I ask people, I say, would you rather feel great and have crappy labs, or would you rather feel crappy and have perfect labs? Well, we all know the
you
answer.
said you put her on a diet of beef, beans, and
She
rice.
decided to do that. That's the cowboy diet. The cowboy diet is beef and beans. She decided to do that variation of a low vitamin A diet. Yes.
Because there isn't any much fiber in that diet, is there?
In beans? Oh my gosh, beans.
No, in beans, yes. So that she's not doing like a vegetable plant-based,
No,
or no,
just beef and beans.
beef and beans.
What we have found is sorry, let me just add this. As long as people get enough protein, which can be different for each of course is different for each person, but as long as they get enough protein and they get a good source of soluble fiber that agrees with them, that is really the basis. I mean, they need some carbs, they need some soluble fiber, they need some protein, but each person can be individual in how much of each of those things they have.
Okay.
That's the basis of kind of the
So
detox.
it's a personal
diet.
choice. So people can, obviously opt for, and obviously lowering the amount of vitamin A that they're ingesting. So they're looking at the foods that they're eating and saying, okay, and the toxins. So,
Yes.
organic where possible and so forth.
Yes.
So we'll go back to the question of the supplements here. So you've got magnesium, potassium, sodium, zinc, selenium.
Yep.
Are these and MB, Molo B?
Molly B.
Are
Yep.
are these the sort of things that you are suggesting to take on a regular basis or as needs?
Well, okay. So if most of the people here will understand that, yes, we're all being exposed to toxins more than we used to. So we are all toxic to some extent, whether it's old stored toxins typically, or whether it's people continuing to take in toxins on a daily basis. So the toxicity issue is there to some extent for just about everybody. I mean, just living, we make toxins inside of us. It's just like a car makes exhaust. Okay, so regarding supplements, most of us know that the food doesn't have in it what it should. So we're already behind the 8 ball because the food doesn't have in it what it's supposed to. Okay. And then we're more toxic. Well, being more toxic requires more nutrients to get rid of the toxins. Okay. Then when you shift into detox mode, like if you were cleaning your house, you're going to use more cleaning materials. So if you shift your body into detox mode, all of a sudden you're going to use more nutrients to get rid of that garbage. So then if you get somebody who is terribly deficient in something, any of those minerals that you just mentioned, significantly deficient in that, and the food doesn't have it in it, they're toxic, and detox uses more nutrients. Do you see how that could, and then they're not, let's
Yep.
say they're not willing to supplement. They're like, I don't believe in supplements. I'm never going to take this. It's not natural. Well, taking in all those toxins wasn't natural either.
Yeah.
So then they're kind of gonna be stuck. Like,
Yep.
because the food doesn't have it and you're not going to supplement it. So whatever happens, happens, right?
So it's also
So
obviously doing lifestyle changes, things like not having tattoos, not drinking
yeah,
alcohol, sunscreen, various things people put on their skin, not drinking fluoridated water. I mean, it's really a whole lot of different things, ensuring you're exercising and opening up all those various pathways. You talk about like dairy, you're against, obviously calcium supplements. But I thought another interesting topic was also copper. There's a sort of, and I must say, I've got my copper bottles. Like what that you are not for copper supplementation, or
oh
there is,
gosh, no, definitely not.
and there's
Um,
obviously the theory around copper that I've obviously heard is that it balances out iron.
yeah. Well, copper. Here's what I can say with the standards I go by, which I've figured out through my years of practice. Almost no one uh, I'll say it in a different way. Nearly everyone is copper toxic, in my opinion. So this is key of understanding the liver. As the liver gets more toxic, detox slows down. As detox slows down, you can't clear toxins as well. So you get more toxic. As you get more toxic, detox slows down. You see the vicious cycle
Yep.
going on? So copper itself has been shown to cause cholestasis, toxic leaky bile. If you go and research copper and cancer, you'll find that many, many cancers are full of copper, and that when they gave people copper chelators to get rid of copper, the cancers shrunk.
Uh-huh.
They're putting, many people have, I mean, almost everybody has copper water pipes going to and from their water heater. Hot water is the best thing to pull copper off of those pipes and put it in the water. So why isn't everybody super healthy from all of that? And then people get into the bioavailable copper and all of this stuff. I can go in every time I do a show on a disease on my live stream, like when we went through diabetes.
Mm.
Let me give you a quick example because that's the big one, diabetes. Copper's high in diabetics.
Okay.
It's right there.
And you,
I think I had a study where they gave a copper chelator to diabetics, or they gave it to mice, and they saw the diabetes that they induced in the mice get better. Now, here's a really interesting thing. What does modern medicine use to treat most type 2 diabetics first? They use metformin, right? What if I were to show you that metformin binds to copper ions to protect you from them?
yep.
That's all metformin's doing, is it's binding to copper and preventing the copper effect on your liver. And so the symptoms get better. And then you want to hear something interesting about metformin and diabetics? The diabetics who take metformin have less risk of cancer.
Right. So it's all tied in together.
Yeah, this is one thing I guess I'm good at, is I tie these things together, and
And
that's
at
like how
this
I'll
point,
show.
we can
Go
talk
ahead.
about, because we're talking about copper and talking about EMF radiation, because we're all
Mm,
exposed to it. So here we have a situation where within the alternative space, a lot of these things are being promoted. I'm not sure your
mm-hmm.
thoughts about colloidal silver, colloidal gold. We've got even colloidal copper now. So people are
Oh,
ingesting all of these various things, and you roll your eyes at me. And then we have, you know, whatever is in the jabs. And we
oh
have
yeah.
5G towers popping up everywhere. We're radiated even within our own home environment with so many electrical devices. And that is obviously affecting the body in some ways. So you're talking about zinc and iron to balance all of that. As you said, certain things replace each other within the body
Yeah.
to make it more healthy, I guess, within whatever toxic soup environment we're living in, and
Yeah.
survival here.
Well, one of the things in my EMF show I went over. So I deal with 90% of the people who come to me are iron overloaded. They have high ferritin and they are copper toxic. And then there's vitamin A toxicity. So I'm going to leave vitamin A out of this for a second. We're going to talk about copper and iron. So, okay. People hear you EMF, right? Electromagnetic fields. Copper. One, like, why do we use copper in wires to run electricity around? Because it's super conductive. Like not technically it's not a superconductor, but it's very conductive. Okay. So does it make sense that if we had too much copper in our system, which is very conductive, very electric, if you will, that if we got around an electromagnetic field, that might agitate the copper in our system and cause us more problems, right? Okay, so then we get into iron. What is the most magnetic mineral that people have in their bodies and they consume on a daily basis? Iron. So if you had too much iron in your system and you get around an electromagnetic field, the electromagnetic field can agitate the iron in you. So what we have seen in the program is as we are getting people less copper toxic. I mean, I've had a client who was so sensitive to chemicals and electromagnetic fields that I've had several of these clients. They cannot live inside a house. They simply, it's too toxic for them. Just the house, whatever house, it's too toxic and there's too much electromagnetics. We got one woman back to living in her house and working. This is not typical results, but she was back in her house and working full time within 6 months. And she used to have to sleep outside in Phoenix, Arizona at night because she couldn't be inside the house with like the air conditioning, anyway. So there's a reason for this. Why would electromagnetic fields affect one? Why are some people electromagnetically sensitive and some people aren't? This could very well be the big difference as to why some people are affected more than others.
And there's really no risk for them to try and remove it because they're either going to get better or they're not going to get better. Right.
Well, I mean, we get into, there's always something that you can do to improve. Like if you could reduce, so let's say, we can work on the copper toxicity. We could ingest less copper. We could take more things that antagonize copper. Funny things, zinc and selenium and molybdenum that I use all antagonize copper.
And remove it.
We use other things that antagonize copper. I mean, the beta glucan in oats grabs onto copper. Like we antagonize copper more than anybody else, and everybody thinks we're going to cause all these copper deficiencies, and it's not happening. You have tons and tons of copper in your liver, tons. There's a type of cell death called cuproptosis. It's copper-mediated cell death, specifically named after copper. So it's just with the EMF thing, so you could get less copper in your system. You could get less iron in your system. Like if you're iron overloaded, we get less iron in your system. And then you become less affected by EMF. And we've seen people, I had EMF sensitivity. How do I know that this works? I was practically losing it a little bit for a while there when I was taking vitamin A and doing stupid diet stuff that led me to this. And I fixed insomnia was so bad. My insomnia was so bad. I was losing it a little bit. And I saw how when people have really bad insomnia, you can go a little crazy. I did see that in myself. I was like, wow, this could really get bad if it keeps going. And it's all gone now. Like,
and that's the power of the correct information, isn't it? That when you are moving in the right direction, because often what happens is we have a problem and then we get told, hey, look, do this, which actually may seem to make the problem better initially. And that's the difficult part, I think, of all of this is that so many people have said, oh, but I took this particular drug or I took this particular supplement. I felt great. But then after a few months or down the track, all these other things happen. So I think before we started on the show, you talked about myocarditis. I think we've linked it up pretty much this whole theory so far. We've linked it up to almost every disease, from liver disease, kidney disease, EMF problems, to cancer, but we haven't really touched the heart here as how, and we know that the liver and the heart is all very linked together. It's through the blood. So I don't know if you want to be able to try and link that up too.
Well, okay. Well, we'll try to do this pretty quick. One of the things people need to know about vitamin D supplements and vitamin A toxicity is that these things pull calcium out of your bones. Don't ever think that we are actually getting DEXA scans showing older women are reversing osteoporosis with our approaches. And we're not giving them calcium and we're not giving them vitamin A or vitamin D. We're restricting those things and their bones are rebuilding. And we're doing lots of magnesium. So the whole osteoporosis thing is just garbage. But when you take calcium out of the bones, like with these things, it goes into the blood. The body is desperate to not let the minerals in the blood get too far out of range, or it will affect your heart and your brain. And if those things go wonky, you might not live. So your body will work extremely hard to keep the minerals in your blood, particularly the electrolytes, which calcium is one of, from getting out of control. So how does your body, if you're sucking calcium out of the bones with vitamin D or vitamin A, and it's going into your bloodstream, what can your body do very quickly to get that calcium out of the bloodstream so it doesn't affect your heart or your brain? It shoves it into soft tissues.
Yep.
Your blood vessels will, people talk about cholesterol lining blood vessels. When they do a scan to see how blocked your carotid artery is, do you know what they call it? They call it a coronary calcium score, because they're measuring the calcium in your artery. It's cholesterol is like the scapegoat. Cholesterol is actually part of your detox system. Cholesterol covers toxins so that you can, move them around the body. But cholesterol is an indicator of detox. LDL has vitamin A in it. So the bad cholesterol, the lousy cholesterol, has vitamin A in it. So maybe that's why it's lousy, right?
Yep.
So anyway, we get into all these things about heart disease. So I have a paper showing that when they gave vitamin A to, I think it was rats, they got calcified aortic valves. Well, that's heart disease, right? Calcification. Yep. So we've got things causing calcium problems. We're depositing calcium into soft tissues. That includes the blood vessels. So we're calcifying those. I can show you research that vitamin A depletes vitamin K. So if vitamin K is extremely important to coagulation and decalcification, but vitamin A depletes it, like the authors said, basically they said it's a super simple thing to deplete vitamin K with vitamin A. That's basically what they said. Yep. It's just, it's straightforward. Okay, so we got vitamin K going down, and that we know heart disease is going to be connected to that. We got people taking vitamin D, which calcifies them, and vitamin D depletes potassium. Vitamin A pulls calcium out of the bones, which means you then calcify soft tissues. Vitamin A blocks potassium channels. So we have all these things negatively affecting the electrolytes and calcifying people. And then everybody's wondering, what about heart disease? Oh, and then retinoic acid, the supposedly active form of vitamin A, is known in what they call retinoic acid syndrome, or they renamed it to differentiation syndrome, is known to cause myocarditis.
Wow.
So we start connecting all of these things. And then there was another paper on mice where I forget how they did it, but they induced a heart attack in them or something.
Yep.
And then they saw in the blood after the heart attack, they saw more retinol esters in the blood. So retinol, vitamin A, bound to a fatty acid ester. Do you know where we store those? We store those in the liver. So how would retinol esters that are in the blood, how did they get there? Probably from a big bile dump by the liver that leaked into the bloodstream. It affected the heart, and then we had a heart attack.
Yeah, and that's why heart attacks are big at Christmas time, right? Because people are drinking alcohol and all of that sort of stuff. The bile dumps into the system, and then boom,
Yeah, the stress is a big dumper of bile, and the holidays are not always a stressful time. And then people are eating and drinking and doing things that they normally wouldn't. And then, so yeah, there's the winter time. One of the things about the winter time in places where they don't get much sun and why people get depressed, part of it's the lack of light. But what does light help us oxidize or detox? In the skin. It helps us oxidize or detox vitamin A in the skin. So if you don't have light around, you're detoxing even less vitamin A. And then you get more problems. And then we're eating, holidays in the US, you're eating sweet potatoes and all these like super high vitamin A dishes with lots of fat. How do we absorb vitamin A through the gut? Fat. So if there's lots of fat in a dish, you absorb even more vitamin A. Alcohol kicks vitamin A that's stored in the liver into the blood. This is in the research. So if you dump all this, you're eating all this vitamin A, you're drinking alcohol, it's dumping vitamin A into the blood, and then all of a sudden we get problems with the heart and all sorts of other stuff. People are getting, skin issues around the holidays because they're eating like garbage. It all makes sense. Oh, and yeah, the things that cause bile dumping that we don't talk about a lot, we have sun, heat, stress, sweating, exercise. So a lot of the things that we tend to think of that are good for us, we've thought this for a long time. They're good for us because they induce bile dumping.
Yeah.
The problem is as I say, the bile is the cause of your problems, and the bile is part of the solution to your problems. We just have to be careful, and that's why I say this is not a game, because that bile, when it comes out too hard, let me give you another example. We had a woman who had really chronic, well, she was on the live chat on one of my live streams, and she said she had really chronic iron deficiency anemia. That was what the doctors called it. They kept feeding her iron pills. She was up to, at one point, the doctor recommended she go up to 10 iron pills a day because her iron wasn't coming up. Now, don't you think that this is a saying I go by, is right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So these doctors kept jacking up her iron pills, even though her iron wasn't going up.
Yeah.
They just kept banging their head against the same wall. Well, she said she said in the live chat, she said, well, a week after starting the 10 or was it 12 iron pills a day, she had a heart attack.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, okay. And I was talking to her as she's doing the live chat, and I said, there was probably something that you did that dumped bile. You triggered a bile dump.
Mm.
And that was what caused it. I said, here's the agitators: sun, exercise, sweating, heat, stress. And she goes, the heart attack happened while I was in the hot tub.
Oh, right.
And
Yeah.
I was like, it was really, I felt bad for it, but it was really also very cool to
connect
I
the
got
dots.
goosebumps
Sure.
right now. It was
But I
very
mean,
cool to
it's
go,
like
oh yeah,
the
this all
things
makes
that are
sense.
the things that are good for us, obviously it's slow and steady to remove it as a more of a lifestyle change, as opposed to a lot of these hard detoxes that people are
Mm-hmm.
trying to do. That's when you can probably get really good results. You'll see a good result if you can get through it alive, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, but if you don't get through it, so the safer method is to go sort of slow and steady wins the race, the kind of, method where you change your lifestyle, you reduce the vitamin A in all the toxins that are coming into your body, feed your body with good, sources of food, move all of this stuff out, and yeah, do the exercise and all of that, but keep it in moderation. Don't kind of go and overdo it,
Yes. Yes.
because you want to support the body through it all, which is also like part of that sauna detox protocol. See, people have done that sauna detox protocol and they've had their labs taken at the start for heavy metals and after,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, they can prove that it's reduced it, but the real risk about it all and doing it so rapidly and not spreading it out is actually death,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that is the end result. But I know we're kind of coming towards the 2-hour mark almost. So is there anything else that you wanted to add here before we kind of round it up? Because a lot of this information, if people want to go deeper into this, they can find on your website,
Mm-hmm.
nutritiondetective.com. They can join your live stream, Love Your Liver, which I think you do weekly. And you have a Madness of Modern Nutrition course that you give up for free. People sign
Yep.
up for your email list. They can find you on X and YouTube as well.
Yes.
And I think you're on LinkedIn, but I don't think you post much on LinkedIn. But you should join us there on LinkedIn, Health Alliance Australia and
Yeah,
myself.
if I can figure out how to auto post on LinkedIn, I will. Yeah, I should. I need to figure out how to put the live stream on there too. But yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't get to cover the supplements. Do you want me to cover those
Yeah, cover
supplements real
that.
quick?
We'll cover that and
Okay.
then we'll close. But if you wanted to cover that, that's an important thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I take great care. Obviously, if I'm like the detox guy, like my supplements, it's very important to me to have them be like absolute minimal ingredients and like the best stuff possible. Like that's just what I do. So we talked about I have kind of my three electrolytes that I talk about: magnesium, sodium, and potassium. We'll cover sodium first real quick. I like Jacobson salt, but what I want in a salt I do not want unrefined salt. They're finding microplastics in salt. Like if you don't think the ocean water is safe to drink without, I mean, obviously we have to take the salt out of it, but if you took all the salt out of seawater enough to be able to drink it, would you trust it to be clean? I wouldn't.
Mm.
So do I trust sea salt, which is just the water removed and the
Yep.
salt remaining? I don't want to eat that crap either. So if we are trying to get sodium, we want this is a key thing in all of our stuff. Everything's toxic. I would rather have things that are too clean or overly clean. And one thing, like it's salt, it's sodium chloride. Like that's what I want. If I want salt, I want sodium chloride. I don't want 72 minerals. Because then if you start counting down the minerals in there, 72 minerals takes you into toxic metals and radioactive metals. Or minerals. I don't want those. I don't want my salt to have radioactivity in it. I don't want it to have lead and mercury and cadmium in it.
So you're talking
anyway,
about just the cheap table salt, yeah?
okay, so no, here's the rules on salt. It's fairly easy. Bright white in color, single ingredient, salt, sea salt, sodium chloride, and so bright white in color, single ingredient, no other ingredients. There was one more thing to it. I mean, I want refined salt. I want sodium chloride.
Yep.
That's the Jacobson Salt Company does it all with water. Like they process
Because there
all
has
that
been
crap
research
out.
done and labs done where, there's very highly toxic chemicals and toxic metals in these salts that they actually sell us as health salts, right?
Yeah. The
Which
unrefined salts.
was
Yeah.
quite a shock to myself, that we've been promoted these various things and there's mercury in it. And it's like, okay. And I think it really gets on the trust level here of all these things that are being promoted, that are no good for us. So you're just saying salt, get it as clean as possible,
Yeah.
maybe
And
from
then
an isolated source that's
yeah,
clean.
and when you salt to taste, you do want to salt like if people don't salt their food, like they will not because that's the way they grew up or whatever, I often can't get them better.
All right. You
we need
actually
some
need salt.
salt. So then also, but nowadays there's people on the internet now pushing like 8 grams of salt a day, 8 grams. So now we're getting into, this is like the whole disinformation psyop thing. They're going to either, there's the people pushing you need low salt, and then there's the people pushing like way too much salt, where you're going to put salt in every glass of water you drink, and it's just too much. Like I went over in diabetes on my show on diabetes, like diabetics eat a lot more salt than controls did. So is that necessarily good for them? Why isn't it fixing their diabetes if that's what they need? So anyway, so salt is just like, you want a clean salt. Single ingredient. You don't want potassium iodide in it. You don't want all the other crap in it. You don't want microplastics in it. You want it refined salt. Okay. Magnesium. Typically magnesium chloride. In my experience, topical magnesium, topical or transdermal magnesium that you apply through the skin is 10 times as effective at raising your systemic magnesium levels as pills. The easy way to think of it is, and it's almost impossible to overdo topical magnesium. Like if you do topical magnesium chloride, and you feel bad, you know it right away. Like you're having a reaction, your body doesn't like that. Okay, you may have a potassium deficiency. That's a common thing. If you have a potassium deficiency, you have a balance of magnesium to potassium in your body. If you have a potassium deficiency and you push magnesium higher, you make that imbalance worse. You may not feel good. But that's not an overdose of magnesium. That's an imbalance.
Yep.
So anyway, topical magnesium is almost impossible to overdo, as long as that you don't have that initial bad reaction.
And they can do magnesium baths as well, right?
Yeah, I know. So I have a whole live stream on topical magnesium approaches, the baths, foot soaks, lotion. We make the best lotion on the market, strongest magnesium potency in it. People say it's an amazing lotion. I mean, I know it's an amazing lotion. It took me 18 formulations and 20 months or 2 years to make it, basically. So it's the best stuff out there. 2 pumps a day will get you the magnesium you need. And I can show you on hair tests.
Yep.
So magnesium by mouth is not very well absorbed. It doesn't raise your levels. I don't care what the studies say. I go by the hair test.
Yep.
So it doesn't work very well to raise systemic magnesium levels, but it can help you poop. It's a non-habit forming sort of laxative. It helps people poop. If you take too much magnesium, I mean, everybody knows that you get diarrhea from that.
Yep.
So if you're just under that, then you can poop better, especially for people who are constipated. So that's magnesium. So then we get into potassium. Potassium is a touchy subject. I can tell you that if you can get your potassium intake right for you, that is one of the quickest ways you can feel better, mood wise, energy wise, sleep wise, pooping wise. Like potassium is critical for thyroid function, it's critical for brain function, it's critical for heart function, and vitamin D depletes it, and vitamin A blocks potassium channels. And we have all these things acting against potassium. Potassium supplements do work. Potassium supplements are the easiest thing to overdo for people who aren't very careful about how they dose things. Like I have people, if you're going to do potassium supplements, you go up by 100 milligrams a day. If you're going up slow, like just steps. But if you want to try more potassium in your diet, the easy way to do it is on a day or two, you have 2 bananas or 3 bananas, or you have like coconut water, 8 ounces, a cup of coconut water is worth about a banana.
Yep.
So the easier way to test out potassium and see if more helps you is to do bananas or coconut water or both, and try more of it and see if you feel better. And then if you do feel better on that, if you don't want to eat that many bananas or coconut water in a day, then you can get into maybe some of the supplements. Like I personally like potassium citrate from Micro Ingredients. I have no affiliation with them, but I love that. It's a little powder. I take, anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of it a day. Not everybody needs that much. Some people need more, but you can, if you take too much potassium too quick, you can feel it in your heart. Yeah. So don't, in any of these things, people will say, well, you can kill yourself with water and the dose makes the poison. Well, we're trying to fix what the food is missing and what you're missing because you've been toxic and deficient. You can mess up dosing on anything, right? You could put too much gas in your car and have it overflow. Like you can screw up anything. So just go slow on things and change them one thing at a time. Zinc is critical for, like, I think the last count was like 200 or more pathways in your body. When I see skin issues, eye issues, hormone issues, I immediately think zinc. And I think of the toxicities, but in terms of nutrients, I think zinc right away. I use zinc picolinate. We are actually working on some supplements with zinc niacinate to come out soon.
Okay.
So it's zinc bound to flush niacin.
Which
Pretty
will
cool stuff.
enhance it. Because I noticed that when you take niacin with anything, it seems to enhance it. This is why you really shouldn't be taking nicotinic acid with, say, a pharmaceutical drug together, kind of.
Right. Yeah, and the studies where they try to say nicotinic acid is bad, there's almost always a bunch of pharmaceuticals in the study. And yeah, so you don't want to be, as I said before, you don't want to be intoxing while you're still trying to detox. So yeah, trying to do these things that are good for you while you're on a bunch of other pharmaceuticals.
So what form of zinc, if would people use? Because there's various forms of zinc.
I only use right now, I used to just use zinc picolinate.
Okay.
Which is funny because it's kind of a relative of niacinate. Zinc picolinate, picolinic acid comes from tryptophan. Nicotinic acid comes from tryptophan. So I'd already kind of been in that area. This was another thing that when Kelsey brought all this niacin information to my attention, and she was like, picolinic acid is part of the tryptophan pathway.
Yep.
And I was like, really? I've been kind of going down that road. And now I have another connection to what I was doing. Zinc picolinate is the only zinc that I saw consistently raise zinc levels for many, many people. And I'm one of the only people out there looking at blood zinc and hair zinc.
Yep.
So picolinate works. I'm still waiting. There's not a lot. There's one paper on zinc niacinate that showed that it was better than the other forms of zinc that were in that study. But I take it myself. We have lots of people using Kelsey's zinc niacinate salve. Kelsey has a Etsy store where she sells a lot of really cool niacin products. It's Terranian Treasures at Etsy.com. TERRANIAN treasures.etsy.com.
We can put that in the description.
Yeah. So she does that. And then we have selenium.
Brazil nuts. Yeah.
You can do Brazil nuts. See, the thing I've been seeing, so Brazil nuts, I don't know if you know this, but they're grown on like protected areas down in Brazil.
Okay.
So they don't farm the Brazil nuts. They just kind of collect them on these areas. Well, think about this. If they're not really interfering with the area that much, but every year the trees come out, the trees soak up the selenium from the soil and they put it into the Brazil nuts. And then the Brazil nuts we collect them. So we take that selenium away from the tree and the
Yeah.
ground and the soil. And we keep doing that every year.
There'll be nothing left. Yeah.
We're going to deplete the selenium. And now what I'm seeing is Brazil nuts are not good. Like I used to tell people 5 Brazil nuts a day if they were moderately deficient,
Mm.
10 Brazil nuts a day if they were pretty significantly deficient. It doesn't work anymore.
Oh.
So the selenium I used to use was, or I'm still using it, but I'm always working on improving. I used yeast-free selenomethionine or L-selenomethionine. That was what I used to use. We are now working on using selenium glycinate, which is selenium bound to a glycine, like we talked about
Mm.
earlier. And then there's the last one is molybdenum. Now, real quick on molybdenum, since we didn't get to cover it, how important it is. Molybdenum is necessary to run ALDH. So is selenium. So you need selenium and molybdenum to run ALDH, the most important detox enzyme, in my opinion. Okay. You need so you need molybdenum to run sulfite oxidase, which is part of breaking down sulfur and getting rid of it. If you have a bad reaction to wine that you don't have to other alcohols, you have a sulfite oxidase issue, and molybdenum could potentially help that. Then we have molybdenum tends to be connected to fungus or yeast problems in the body. So if you've had chronic candida type issues, you're probably molybdenum deficient. If you tend to have a lot of sulfury gas or sulfury burps, molybdenum deficient, you're not processing the sulfur right. Xanthine oxidase. Okay, so you need molybdenum to run xanthine oxidase. Xanthine oxidase is part of preventing gout, and it's also part of detoxing things that people take in, like caffeine.
Yeah.
So if somebody's like super sensitive to caffeine, you might be deficient in molybdenum to run your xanthine oxidase. So molybdenum is like actually one of the most important detox minerals out there, and hardly anybody's heard of it.
Yeah, that's true.
We used to get it. I used to be able to tell people, I don't know how many years ago it was now, 8 years ago or something. I used to tell people if you eat a cup of beans a day, you can get your molybdenum up.
Wow.
And it used to work. Beans are the highest source of molybdenum. Does that work anymore? No. Like I've seen on hair tests with the same approaches, stuff that used to work doesn't work. So if you're sitting there going, I don't want to take supplements, I'm telling you the food situation is getting worse.
Mm.
Let's just hit on glyphosate real quick. Glyphosate, two main things it does. One is it does slow cytochrome P450 detox pathways, particularly the one that makes certain retinoic acids into less damaging retinoic acids. So it inhibits detox. But what was glyphosate originally designed for? It was designed to be an industrial boiler, like something that boiled off stuff, descaler. So it ate away at mineral deposits in industrial boilers. Okay. It is sucking minerals out of you. It is sucking minerals out of the plants. It is sucking minerals out of the animals. It is everywhere. It is basically destroying the Great Barrier Reef because it's sucking away all the minerals from it. Like glyphosate is part of why this problem is going on.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere. They're using more and more of it every year. So, that's why I'm saying like this mineral problem is getting worse and worse and worse. So if you don't want to
Yeah, and
supplement,
on the other side, we sort of have to solve it with regenerative farming and all of that. And hopefully humans will hit sort of we do our best work when our backs are to the wall, don't we?
yes,
And we need to find the answer to what we're looking at, which is
yeah,
where you've come into all of this. I think this has been an extraordinary podcast. That's tied, hopefully for everyone in the audience, it's tied together a lot of the pieces for them. And it really is just a taster. I think, we've covered in this time for what you can learn from you. And also I think there's a sense that people do, if they do need support, they can come along to your website, nutritiondetectives.com. Not everyone can do it on their own. They do need some pointers. There could be something that's in their life that they don't realize is actually poisoning them. We've only listed some of the major poisons. There are so many literally
yes,
within the environment, within the things that we consume every day, the products in our household that can get into our bodies that we have to detoxify. And there would be no time, and there would be you know, we would be here forever to list them all. But I think it's given people the big picture of what is necessary, because I think a lot of people talk about detoxification without really truly understanding the process of what is going on here. And what you've laid out here is very important information for them, and also for them to stop poisoning themselves with things that they think are healthy but actually are not.
Yes,
Anyway,
absolutely.
thanks everyone for watching today. Thank you, Dr. Garrett Smith, for your time. You can also find Health Alliance Australia and me on LinkedIn. And as I said before, Dr. Smith is on X, YouTube, his website, nutritiondetective.com. We'll put links in the description. I would love it if people could join the mailing list if you want to stay in touch, and really, share this widely, subscribe, but most importantly, send this along to friends and family and post on various groups, because that's how we beat the censorship out there. It's relying on, Rumble and YouTube to post this out to our followers is really not working anymore. The way we beat the censorship right now is actually for people to send it directly with a little message to your friend, have a watch of this, and understand the whole mechanism. It's 2 hours of your time, which is literally